Hello, lovelies. Today we're taking a look at Macuahuitl. I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm going to get it wrong, and all the other pronunciations wrong through all of this. So that's your lot. I mean, I'm British, damn it. We call places by the names that we decide they are. Bombay, for example, or other places, even Ireland. Ayr? What the hell kind of name is that? No, Ireland, because it's full of people who are full of ire. Angry ginger people. Ireland. But, anyway. Here's a game by the Basic Expert. It's got a YouTube channel. You can toggle on over there and chat and so on, and tell him Grim sent you. It is a hardcover book with metallic shiny red inlay. It tops out at about 190 pages, I think, in a sort of digest format. About 180 pages. So it's admirably concise compared to a lot of books that we tend to get these days, and yet it is still packed with stuff. The artwork is red, black and white, so a little bit of colour language going on here, and has a nice red ribbon, which we always like to see, don't we? So the whole point of McFlurry is that it is about the Aztecs. Now, that's challenging, I think, today. The Aztecs tend to be a people that we think of quite unsympathetically. Probably something to do with all the enormous amounts of human sacrifice that went on in many Mesoamerican cultures. And so we tend to think of them as inhuman, crazy, even villainous people, and they're really challenging even to moral relativists, because it's hard to find an excuse for human sacrifice, harvesting hearts, all of that kind of thing. Whatever sort of beliefs you might have had, it seems like a tremendous waste of human life, and so it challenges our capability to understand quite how any of this works. And this game doesn't pull any punches with any of that. It doesn't soften any of the dark and nasty truths about the Aztecs. Mind you, we've lost an awful lot of information about them thanks to Portuguese and Spanish Catholic monks, but what are you going to do? So yeah, it doesn't pull any punches on any of that, and it doesn't pull any punches on gender roles within Aztec society and so on. So this is historically authentic, you might say, and I think it's all the better and stronger for it. That doesn't mean there is nothing fantastical to the game at all. It just means that the fantastical elements are within the belief systems of the people being portrayed. And that's great. I mean, if you want to stray from the book, you can, but it's nice to have something presented pure and contextually and without pulling any punches. It's just a different set of priorities to a lot of modern game design, and something I think a lot of people could probably learn from. There is a pronunciation guide for all the words, which is helpful, but I'm just lazy. For example, if you were looking to pronounce this word, it would go a little something like this. But as we've already covered, I'm not going to name anything by the correct name as we go through this. But still, it's useful if you really want to do that sort of thing. Now, as a 0E clone, that is, the very first versions of D&D, As a derivative of that, it has a certain amount of interest for its own reason, though you could also check out White Box, WIGHT, if that interests you. It is interesting because it goes back even further than most OSR stuff, which is sort of BECME or BX or Rule Cyclopedia for the most part. So it's an interesting exercise to go all the way back, but I think for a lot of more modern gamers, it's just going to be frustrating in the relative lack of features and character differentiation, customization, and so on, though the setting stuff really helps with that. And I often find this to be a bit of a problem anyway with more tribal societies in games. There are less adventuring type roles that are available, and so there is less character differentiation, especially when the statistics and so on don't particularly allow for much in the way of differentiation. For example, the maximum bonus you can get from a statistic in this is +1, or a penalty of -1, and that's really it. So statistics aren't necessarily hugely important unless the games master chooses to interpret them in various other ways. There is some important Zodiac stuff which helps provide some background and sets your character within the world. I've seen similar things in games like Dungeon Crawl Classics, but it's more characterful and more immersive here and rooted in the presumed beliefs of the actual people and society involved. In fact, the whole book is probably a pretty decent, good, accessible primer to a lot about Aztec society, history, religion, and beliefs, and so on. You know, games are educational, and because you need to learn the game to play the game, I find it helps with motivation to learn things about history or legends, beliefs, all of that kind of stuff. There are many reasons why you might want to get into an Aztec game. For me, a large part of that is the whole aspect of role-playing that has been forgotten in this rush for self-representation, self-inserts, and so on. That is the ability to project oneself into an alien mindset and approach the game through that. That's what's most interesting to me. Living an imaginary life as somebody else with very different beliefs, goals, and so on. So it's nice to have that option here, and for it to be a game that doesn't pull its punches in representing that history and mythology in an authentic and contextual sort of way. Classes wise, we get 4 different flavors of warrior, being a warrior culture and all. We get a merchant caste, and we get a sort of priest/sorcerer role. I might have liked to have seen Mac Daddy open up some more options for characters. That's the only thing I felt was lacking, but then it also could have taken you beyond what's really viable and what's really historically authentic. For example, you know, there is a lot of lore around shapeshifters in Aztec and Mesoamerican mythology. So having an option to open up possibilities for female characters, it might have been nice to have had maybe a Chichtli, which is a sort of witch owl sorceress shapeshifter, a bit like a druid. You could probably build it off the back of a druid. But I guess, given the mythology, they're much more likely to have been monsters than to have been available as player options, because even for the Aztecs, spiriting away children and eating them was seen as a bad thing, even though, yeah, they were tearing people's hearts out. But hey-ho. So yeah, there is a lot here. There's no point me going over the rules too much, because if you're familiar with D&D and its derivatives, you're largely going to be familiar with what's here. There's not a great deal of point of me going over the history of the Aztec world as presented here in Macklemore. But yeah, it's there, and it's presented concisely and effectively, and you have the motivation to learn it. So it's interesting particularly if you're an historical gamer, or you want inspiration, you want to bring these societies and so on into your game. In terms of rules innovations, largely the main thing that we have here is the idea of status points, which are both currency and a measure of what level you are, and you can invest those points into things. You're only given levels 1 to 10, but those excess status points that you might earn from doing great deeds or whatever can then be invested into holdings, property. You can spend them like money to get equipment and so on. Speaking of equipment, the name of the game, MacBook, refers to the infamous obsidian-bladed wooden swords that they would carry. So you have all the rules for that, and that might be interesting, particularly if you want to do a riff on Dark Sun or something, which would have a very similar sort of technology level and access to materials. So that's interesting as well. So there's not a huge amount more I can say, really. We have a good selection of monsters, and some of them are interesting. Mesoamerican monsters haven't been investigated a huge amount in other books. There are other neglected parts of the world that could do with similar treatment, similar cultural and mythological treatment. But this is definitely a good entry for that sort of thing. Scores, then, I suppose. It's a difficult thing to review. It tickles my fancy in a lot of ways, but I recognise that I'm a bit of an odd duck in my interest in history and my desire to see accurate history reflected in games, sometimes where appropriate. So it's not for everyone. And being a 0E clone also, I think, makes it less for everyone. It would be good to see the basic expert do maybe little conversion pamphlets for using the setting material that's present in this in other games, similar to what I did with Whitechester. It would be fun and interesting to see a Shadow Dark conversion or a DCC conversion, particularly the DCC conversion, because there's quite a lot of crossover in ideas and so on that are presented here. In terms of style, it is a nice object. We have the familiar Aztec pattern. The foiling is nice. The presentation in the 3-color format is nice. Most of the book tends to have the illustrations and so on that we might recognize from carvings from the actual culture itself. Though there are a few illustrations that are more normal presentation. Honestly, I think I would have preferred it if the whole book was illustrated this way, so as to maintain the kind of grounding in the culture. But I recognise that I'm probably in a significant minority on that score. It's just I think that's what I would have done if it was me doing it. I would have presented everything in the Aztec style and nothing in the sort of Western illustrative style. But again, I'm a weirdo, so you probably shouldn't listen to me. But overall, I think the presentation is very well done. It's very immersive. It's perhaps a little dry, the language. It's a little historical text and technical manual. Could have done with a bit more creative flair here and there, but it does the job in that it conveys the rules and the setting, just maybe a little dry. So overall for style, I'm going to give this a low 4 for style. I think it either, for me, it either needed to really fully commit to the Aztec styling, or have made the non-Aztec style images, the Western style illustrations, to have made them really stand out more, and like blown a large amount of money on getting them being really outstanding. Either one of those, I think, would have bumped it up a whole point. So I would have given a 5, probably, in that instance. But as things stand, low 4. In terms of substance, everything is here that you need. It's a complete game. It's an excellent primer on Aztec society and everything. Can't really fault it for that. I think some people would be left hungry, needing a bit more. And I felt that maybe there were some options and some character depth that I would have preferred to see, but again, that's a matter of personal taste. So again, that would give it a low 4 for substance. So 4 for style, 4 for substance, 8 out of 10, 4 out of 5. Definitely a recommendation from me, but I think this is a special interest book. If you're into Mesoamerican history and mythology, definitely. If you want authentic historical role-playing, I think, again, definitely. But I think the scope and the appeal of the game is narrowed by the fact that it is zero-y for the most part, and also because the big thing that for me that's a selling point in that authentic history, I think that could be off-putting to a lot of people. Of course, you don't have to run as written, but when I'm reviewing and judging, I have to review as written. But yeah, definitely worth it if you fit into that little niche like I do. No regrets for buying it. Zang. Much digital ink and blood has been spilt talking about diversity representation in tabletop gaming, and in every other field of geek and nerd endeavour. Usually these conversations are extremely combative, and they tend to end poorly for everyone involved. I've been involved in these debates and discussions myself, to my detriment, the position I hold being that free expression and the vision of the author or creator should trump any and all other concerns, including diversity, representation, and so on. To my mind, the answer is for people to create according to their own conscience, not to be condemned out of hand, or for their motivations to be presumed, and for diversity of ideas to be the benchmark. I want a world in which Varg Vikernes and Olivia Hill can both make and sell the games that they want, and where I can ignore both of them. That said, I cannot help but be drawn to controversial topics. That is where the interesting conflicts and stories lie, and there are few topics so controversial as the treatment of minorities within media. Here we arrive at a nexus point, a conflict point, between realism, expectation, demands for representation, demands for free expression, historical revisionism, magic, science fiction, truth, is, and ought. That makes it interesting. But the battle lines of identitarian politics, liberalism, conservatism, the regressive left and cultural libertarianism also make it an area fraught with difficulty and willful misunderstandings. There are no good, or at least no satisfactory, answers to a lot of these questions. Perhaps there are just multiple approaches, each of which will annoy some group or other. What's true in all circumstances, however, is that these controversial topics are interesting, fascinating, and important in terms of world, character, and scenario building, whatever your particular stance may be. This booklet intends to examine these issues in and of themselves, outside of the current state of controversy, and to ask, rather, how we might better simulate the plight of minority groups, understand them within the context of fictional worlds, make allowances for player characters who might seek to buck those societal trends, or to allow characters, through their actions, to affect social change within the game worlds. Available at post-mort.com and DriveThruRPG.